Creating safe environments. My name is Gilda Grobe and I'll be going over this. What is elder abuse? According to Lax and Pillamer, they are debated about how to define elder abuse and which types of behavior to include in the definition. Consensus has arisen about the inclusion of 5 major types of elder abuse: physical abuse, or acts carried out with the intention to cause physical pain or injury; psychological or verbal abuse. It defines as acts carried out with the aim of causing emotional pain or injury. Sexual abuse, defined as non-consensual sexual act of any kind. Financial exploitation involving the misappropriation of an older person's money or property. And neglect, or the failure of a designated caregiver to meet the needs of a dependent older person. In other words, elder abuse is the maltreatment of an older or elderly individual. Warning signs would depend on the type of abuse. For instance, if it's financial, there would be sudden withdrawals from the bank, or if it's physical, one would be seeing bruises that are unexplained. But most of the times, those types have small signs. So one can look out for, because not all the times are those signs evident. They are more subtle, so we have to keep an eye for unexplained things that may be out of the norm. One of them would be also neglect, so unexplained weight loss. A person will also not show any interest of being in social contact, or at random times would be unreasonably fearful. Symptoms would include bruises, fractures, weight loss, not having social contact, depression, unexplained falls or lacerations. But again, there are different types of elder abuse, and they all also have different symptoms. Causes. According to Pellemere and Finkelhor, in a study of elder abuse victim and non-abused control group, they found that abuse is associated with personality problems of the caregiver. So in other words, it's the other person who is caring for that elder person. Community resources. So what can we do? Well, for starters, we can try and give that individual, we can have that individual start talking to that person, to somebody else. If not, they can try to get evidence that something is not going right, or if you start to suspect, maybe set up a camera, try and ask questions. And then there are also phone numbers that one can call in order to make anonymous calls and make a report, such as Adult Protective Services, police, or sometimes even the physicians can report elderly neglect. Now we are going to over child abuse. And child abuse, according to Brazier and Gill, refers to any emotional, sexual, or physical mistreatment or neglect by an adult in a role of responsibility towards someone who is under 18 years of age. It's not something anybody wants to or ever thinks is going to happen, but there are some warning signs, such as um, clothes that are ill-fitting. Sometimes the child will revert back to earlier behavior. So maybe he or she is already older, and then all of a sudden starts having like bedwetting, or they start doing, they go back to like an earlier age. Sometimes they can be withdrawn, they can change in their behavior, they might not have eye contact. These are some of the symptoms. So head injuries, like I mentioned earlier, little contact with adults, inappropriate response to pain, fractures, and some of these can be also reported by a physician. Causes. There are complex reasons as to why this occurs, but it can also be when an adult hits a child or causes them harm. Community resources. Right here is there are a couple of community resources, such as, police talking to a teacher, or maybe the teacher is the one who will bring that up to the parent, and maybe they can start looking into what's going on and go from there. Now we go on to sexual assault. And sexual assault is any type of sexual activity contact that you do not consent to. Some of the warning signs would be unwanted touching, or being taken advantage of while one is drunk, or otherwise when they're not giving consent. Some of the symptoms that would occur with this is that a sudden change in their behavior as well. They'll go, instead of maybe being a happy person, they change their demeanor, they're depressed, they start being withdrawn from others, they don't want to be touched, they can't concentrate, they don't know who to trust, they're maybe afraid of that aggressor or being left alone with that person who happened to take advantage. Causes, it can happen to anyone from men or women, adults, children, the elderly. And this is done when another person takes advantage of another person without their consent. These are some of the community resources, and these resources are also open 24 hours a day. These are hotlines as well that people can have access to. That's why they have the 1-800 number, which is, even with a telephone, the dial ones, but everybody seems to have a cell phone nowadays. Um, Going on into domestic abuse. Domestic abuse is more than just hitting, shoving, and other physical attacks. It's a pattern of controlling behaviors. The goal is always to get and keep power over an intimate partner. Some of these warning signs, they may not be clear but subtle. Um, it also can be that that person is hiding the injuries because they're embarrassed or fears the aggressor. Personally, this is something that hits home because I saw that with my mother, so I can relate as to what warning signs to look out for. Symptoms would not be not making eye contact, making excuses as to how they got hurt, bruises, withdrawing from family, covering up bruises, cuts with makeup, and not really saying how the injuries happened. Causes, when the other person has control over another person. Some of these are community resources. You can reach out to the police. There are shelters. There's a hotline. You can talk to other family, but sometimes they're ashamed of it or embarrassed that they don't want to reach out to family. Sometimes they'll go to a church, especially if the church is always, well, not always, but the churches have programs that can help them and reach in contact with somebody else. So thank you.